I was 2 days away from turning 26. I was 3 weeks away from taking the bar exam. I didn't, and my whole life flashed before my eyes. And then you start thinking, am I going to even get to do the rest of my life? How long am I going to be here? All of that stuff that goes by. I'm like, how am I going to tell my girlfriend, now fiance, my mom, my dad, my family? It's just there's a million things that run through your head. It's almost so much that you end up thinking about nothing. You just kind of feel numb. Hi, my name is Jackson Hour. I am from Kansas City, Missouri, and I was diagnosed with stage 3 colon cancer in the summer of 2024. I would describe it as a shock and just an experience that really showed me, what I wanted in life. There wasn't a ton of red flags, honestly, leading up to when I got diagnosed. I kind of caught it by happenstance almost. I've been having abdominal pain. That was my main symptom, but I'd only been having it for probably, I don't know, 2.5 weeks before I went to the ER. And I just, because I was having abdominal pain, decided to take a laxative pill. And I thought that would maybe help me. And when it didn't, and because of the tumor in my colon, forced me to, I started vomiting and couldn't keep anything down. So went to the ER just because I was super dehydrated from that. And I told them I had abdominal pain once I got there. So they did a CT scan just to, double check. And they had already given me fluids and stuff for the dehydration. So I was kind of feeling okay besides the abdominal pain at that point. I didn't think there'd be any problem. And the doctor came back in and was like, is there a history of colon cancer in your family? So it was from there just a complete shock. They didn't know for certain if it was colon cancer, because they said sometimes on a CT scan like that, can just, that type of narrowing that was showing in my colon can pop up and they can go in and do a colonoscopy and sometimes nothing's there. They don't know. But because there was some air building up in the other part of my gastrointestinal tract, they thought it maybe was a tumor. So they admitted me to the hospital immediately. I had a colonoscopy the next day that confirmed there was most likely a tumor there, and they took a little biopsy piece of it. But then because, again, it was blocking my entire colon, I had a transverse colectomy to remove the tumor the day after that. And I was in the hospital for a week during that whole process. It's a whirlwind because it all happened so fast. I think I got to the ER on July 3rd. My colonoscopy was an emergency one on the 4th of July. And then on the 5th of July, the doctor did my surgery again. As it was an emergency surgery because they were worried about that air building up in the other part of my tract. So they thought they needed to do it ASAP. As far as my recovery and what I remember from surgery day itself, again, it's just such a whirlwind. So it was like, listen, we need to do this right now. Are you okay with this? And I was like, yes, please save my life, essentially. And I went in, they told me what they were going to do. They made 4 incisions around my gut area and 1 long incision up my belly button. And it was like a laparoscopic surgery, I think is the term. And they took out a couple centimeters of my colon. And it's kind of funny looking back. They told me they could give me these numbing shots in my stomach beforehand that would help with the pain after. So I said, okay. They gave me the shots, and when I woke up from surgery, I was in a ton of pain. So I was like, oh, they must not have given me the shots. I must be misremembering that. And then once the shots wore off, I was like, oh my God, thank you for giving me the shots originally. Because it was very painful. So the recovery for the next couple of days was, trying to get to the point where you can walk and do all the normal stuff. Because your abdomen, every time you sit up and move and do anything at all, really, besides lay flat on your back, it's very painful. I left that afternoon of July 10th, and when I got home from the hospital, because they had just discharged me at that point because I was ready to go home. I had recovered from the surgery, but they didn't have my biopsy stuff back. And I think I had been home for maybe an hour when my doctor called me and told me that they had gotten the results back and that the tumor was cancerous and that it had spread to a couple of my lymph nodes, which made it stage 3. I was 25. I was 2 days away from turning 26. I was 3 weeks away from taking the bar exam. I didn't, and my whole life flashed before my eyes. And then you start thinking, am I going to even get to do the rest of my life? How long am I going to be here? All of that stuff that goes by. I'm like, how am I going to tell my girlfriend, now fiance, my mom, my dad, my family? It's just there's a million things that run through your head. It's almost so much that you end up thinking about nothing. You just kind of feel numb once they say that to you. It kind of just sounds like the parents and Charlie Brown talking to you. It just is a buzzing noise. I had a great care team and stuff at the St. Luke's Hospital in Kansas City. And pretty much immediately, the doctor that did my surgery, he recommended me to an oncologist in their cancer group that is very good and does colorectal cancer stuff. And I had an appointment with him probably a week after my diagnosis, and he kind of walked me through, here's the typical regimen of chemotherapy that we do for your type of cancer and this diagnosis. And then it was essentially, I had, I think, another 11 or 12 days before the bar at that point. So then he was like, we'll do your surgery to have a port implant in your chest that will administer the chemotherapy drug through a couple of days after that. And then I started chemo at the very beginning of August. So I think I took the bar on the 30th and 31st of July. I had my port put in on August 2nd, and then I started chemo on August 5th. So again, all very fast. And I didn't go to another doctor and have another second opinion. Dr. Roth is a very smart guy, and we trusted him a lot, and I went with what he told me to do. My chemo story is probably a little different than a lot of people's. When I started out on my chemo regimen, it was going to be an infusion every 3 weeks and then chemotherapy pills for 2 weeks on, 1 week off in between. So during that first infusion, I felt terrible. It wasn't a good routine, right? I kind of felt like I was in a fog. I was laying down in bed for, the first 3, 4 days after the infusion, not really being able to move. So I didn't have much of a routine. I kind of just was trying to do anything I could to get to the next one. And when I went in for my second chemo infusion, I had a allergic reaction similar to anaphylaxis right after we left my infusion, and I had to go back to the hospital and get a bunch of Benadryl and things like that because my throat had been closing up. We had to call an ambulance. It was not a super fun time. Uh, and then right before my third infusion, at that point, the chemotherapy pills, I was having another reaction to them in my stomach. So I had lost probably in the first 3 weeks, I think 40 pounds. Couldn't keep anything down, and my abdominal pain was almost back like when I had the cancer. But then I went in and they did a CT and there's nothing there. So it was just an adverse reaction I was having to the drug being administered through the pill. So I ended up being in the hospital for another week at that point. This is right around Labor Day. I was there for another week while they tried to figure out what was going on with me and how we were going to go about it moving forward. And so after that, things kind of started to smooth out. They switched me I did chemotherapy infusions every 2 weeks. And then I went back to the traditional other method, which is a pump. So essentially when they send you home, you have what looks like, I described it to my friends as what it looks like, a Game Boy that's attached to you, and it administers another 48 hours worth of the same drug that you get during chemotherapy infusions. And so from that point on, I was able to actually start living life during chemotherapy again. Like I said at the beginning, I didn't have a routine. I didn't know, I couldn't do anything really because my side effects were so bad, the nausea, the vomiting, everything. After that, my main side effects, were fatigue the days of the infusion and the days that I was having my pump still administering the drug. Every once in a while you'd have some nausea, typical stuff like that, right? But I was still able to go to work every day besides the days I was having my infusion. I would go do all the normal people stuff that you do with your friends when you're in your 20s. I'd go to my friends, watch football, do whatever we were doing during the week. I even started working out again at that point and gained all 40 pounds back before I got done with chemotherapy. So that was something for me that was actually super helpful, was just once we got my regimen down and I could kind of feel like a normal person when I wasn't actually having the infusion and the pump attached to me, really helped my mental and just getting through the 6 months worth of chemo. My first infusion was in August. My last one was the very end of January. Once I finished my last infusion, that would have been January 28th, 2025. So the very beginning of this year. They told me wait a couple of days, obviously, while your pump finishes up, and then you're going to come back in. We're going to do scans of your chest, your abdomen, and then we're going to do what my doctor calls it's a Signatera test, which is essentially just a blood work test that finds leftover tumor cancer cells from your original diagnosis that are still in your bloodstream. And so like after I had my tumor taken out originally in July, there was a low reading of cancer still being in my blood because it had spread to two of the 29 lymph nodes, I think, that they had taken out of me in the original biopsy. And so my Signatera test afterwards was completely negative. There was no signs of cancer, and there was no abnormalities in my chest CT or my abdomen CT, which at that point I was declared in remission, or no evidence of disease, NED, as some people call it. That's a euphoric feeling. You feel like you've got your life back, especially when you're 26 years old. I felt like I could start to be a normal person again and deal with normal problems and things. It made me think about life a lot differently. Before it's just get through treatment and please be healthy, and then now it's like, okay, now I can think about proposing to my girlfriend, or things like that you kind of push to the side when you're doing treatment, because you got to give it your all while you're in the middle of it. I worked through all of treatment, and everybody that I worked with in my office and everything is great. Like, they were completely understanding and did everything to make it as smooth as possible for me. But sometimes there's just days where you just can barely even function, right? You're so tired, and just trying to get through that and push through and be normal, trying to maintain a appearance of everything is fine whenever your body is just deteriorating is tough, and then trying to calm other people down in your life with something that I didn't necessarily love, and I hated when I would see my mom, my dad, brother, sister hurting because I was hurting, and I can't do anything about it. Same thing for my fiance, when she would be upset and I couldn't do anything to make her feel better, really, because it's like, well, I still have 4 months left of this. Like, you're going to have to watch me do this 10 more times. So things like that were just frustrating. And I was a guy too, before my treatment. I worked out 5 days a week and was very active, and then having to really adjust my expectations of what working out looked like and what my physical activity levels could look like. And my friends are going to be normal 20-year-olds that go to the bar on the weekends, and they're out till 12:31 in the morning or whatever, and I'm like, all right, I'm going to bed at 10 o'clock, guys. It sort of makes you feel a lot older than you are. So things like that, just trying to adjust to what life was like with cancer versus what my life was like before, was a challenge. I feel lucky for the most part. I feel like I have most of my old self back at this point. For me, one of the big things with that was getting my port taken out a little over a month ago. At least that's the last little reminder I kind of had attached to me at that point that still made me think about it. But the only thing I kind of think is gone from the old me, and I think everybody that goes through it, deals with it, is just the sort of, like, not carefreeness, but you don't think about cancer every day as a person walking around before you're diagnosed. And then now after, I'm just, every tiny little thing you feel with your body is like, you just worry a lot more. So there's a little bit of just anxiety and things like that I deal with now that before I didn't have to deal with. So there's just a little bit of that carefree in your 20s kind of nature that I had before that I won't get back at this point. But I mean, for the most part, I feel almost the exact same as I did before the diagnosis. Another Signatera test. They do that for me every 3 months, just to monitor whether or not there's any kind of cancer cells that are popping back up in my blood, so that they can do scans early and try to catch any reoccurrence early. I had another CT scan of my chest also, probably 3 weeks ago, and it was all clear, so it was all good. And then my CEA, which is like it's a carcinogenic antigen type of test, and that was another blood work thing they did for me. That was negative the other day, so that was good. But every time, I mean, the week leading up to all of that stuff it's nerve wracking, It's nothing, it's not fun to, like, think about, but you just kind of have to focus on you feel good in the moment. So don't worry about, going in there and what they might find or what they might not find, because it's just part of your life from this point on. So you just have to try to focus on how you feel in the moment, and if you feel good, just enjoy it while you can. You can beat it, right? That's the thing. Like, I'm a perfect example of that. And granted, I'm pretty freshly in remission in NED. It's only been a few months, but I feel great. I've got my life pretty much back to where it was before. So I know that there was a lot of points for me that during treatment, it felt a million miles away, from the end. Even when you're getting close, I would have times where I'd go in for an infusion and my white blood cell count's too low, so they can't give me my infusion, and they have to delay it a week. So then that delays out your end date. So it just always feels like the light at the end of the tunnel is never going to get there. But once you do, And once you get to the other side, and you can do it. It's just once you get to that point, then you will feel great. So it's just a part. It's just trying to push through and just being mentally tough and having a good support system around you. Those are all the things that helped me stay hopeful and just push through and get to the other side. I don't think I would have been able to do it without my family and my friends, fiance, everybody else in my life. So the message of hope too is just you're never alone, and everybody else in your life is also going through it with you. And so you can always lean on people that you have around you and just find a way to get to the other side. And then once you do, it's a great feeling and you can get back to normal. It's possible to do. Lean on the people around you and try to stay positive. And it's not, you're never going to be perfect with that. I wasn't Mr. Positivity every single day of treatment, right? There's good days and there's bad days, and there's good hours and bad hours. There's good minutes and bad minutes. Every different second of the day you can feel different during treatment, right? But trying to maintain a positive outlook and believing that you're going to get through to the other side, and leaning on the people that you have around you and trying to focus on doing normal things. Like for me, once my chemotherapy treatment got regimented and I felt like I had a little bit of a routine going on and I could go and see my friends and go do normal things, helps you forget about it for even if it's just an hour or two. Like it just stuff like that is so important during treatment, I think, to your mentals. And I honestly think that having that type of stuff helps your end result, because it does you no good to sit around all day and worry about whether or not treatment's working. You have to try to find other things to focus on.